All right, so we're going to go ahead and start the text. The audio will be playing. It will also be highlighted as it is read. And once I get to the end of each chunk, I will pause. I will tell you to pause the video, and you will be filling out your Rikki-Tikki-Tavi reading journal. I will show you how to do that with the first chunk of text. But for now, let's go ahead and listen to the first chunk of text for Rikki-Tikki-Tavi.
This is the story of the great war that Rikki-Tikki-Tavi fought single-handed through the bathrooms of the big bungalow in Sigauli cantonment. Darcy the tailor bird helped him, and Chuchundra the muskrat, who never comes out into the middle of the floor, but always creeps round by the wall, gave him advice. But Rikki-Tikki did the real fighting. He was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg, front or back, that he chose to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush, and his war cry as he scuttled through the long grass was "Rick-tick-tick-tick." One day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his father and mother and carried him, kicking and clucking, down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there and clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun on the middle of a garden path, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother. "Let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him into the house, and a big man picked him up between his finger and thumb and said he was not dead, but half choked. So they wrapped him in cotton wool and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. "Now," said the big man, he was an Englishman who had just moved into the bungalow, "don't frighten him, and we'll see what he'll do." It is the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from nose to tail with curiosity. The motto of all the mongoose family is "Run and find out," and Rikki-Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was not good to eat, ran all round the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself, and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. "That's his way of making friends." "Ouch, he's tickling under my chin," said Teddy. Rikki-Tikki looked down between the boy's collar and neck, snuffed at his ear, and climbed down to the floor, where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother, "and that's a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him." "All mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki-Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out into the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better.
All right, that's the first chunk of text. Let's take a look at your reading journal. And let's start by thinking about the key ideas that were in this first chunk of text. I know that we learned about Rikki-Tikki, who was a mongoose, and he was swept away from his home by floodwater and was eventually found and cared for by a family. That is what I got from that chunk of text, is that Rikki-Tikki is a mongoose. He was swept away from his home by floodwater, and he was eventually found and cared for by a nice family. the evidence that I can find in the text. So for evidence, I need to actually go back to the text right here, and I need to find one sentence that proves that he was found by a family who takes care of him. So let's go back, and I'm just going to scan the text here. And okay, there's the flood. Dead mongoose. No, he's not dead. Let's take him in and dry him. How about they wrapped him in cotton wool and warmed him over a little fire? He opened his eyes and sneezed. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to actually write that here the way that I would like you to write any quotes or any evidence from a text is you first put it in quotation marks. I wrote it exactly as it was in the text, and then I'm going to put paragraph 5 because that's where I found this evidence. And the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to make a prediction or an inference or make an analysis. So I am going to start by analyzing the characters. This tells us that the characters are good people because obviously they're good people. They took in a wild mongoose and took care of him and made sure he survived. I predict that Rikki Tikki will become this family's pet. And let's see, this is important because it sets the stage for the rest of the story. We're introduced to all of the characters. So this is what I would like you to do for the remainder of the chunks of text. I will make sure to ask you to pause the video after every chunk. And then once you are finished with this paper, we will be doing some other work with it. So go ahead and pause this now and make sure that you write down chunk number 1, key ideas, evidence, and you don't have to do all 3. You can just choose one sentence to do here. It's up to you. But anyway, go ahead and pause the video now, and we will get back to reading once you start it up again. All right, now that you have written your key ideas, evidence, and prediction, and we've done that together, we're going to continue reading the rest of the text, and it is up to you to finish the rest of your reading journal. Good luck.
There are more things to find out about in this house, he said to himself, than all my family could find out in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out. He spent all that day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtubs, put his nose into the ink on the writing table, and burned it on the end of the big man's cigar, for he climbed up into the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lighted, and when Teddy went to bed, Rikki Tikki climbed up too. But he was a restless companion, because he had to get up and attend to every noise all through the night and find out what made it. Teddy's mother and father came in the last thing to look at their boy, and Rikki Tikki was awake on the pillow. I don't like that, said Teddy's mother. He may bite the child. He'll do no such thing, said the father. Teddy's safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now, but Teddy's mother wouldn't think of anything so awful. Early in the morning, Rikki Tikki came to early breakfast in the veranda, riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him banana and some boiled egg. He sat on all their laps one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to be a house mongoose someday and have rooms to run about in. And Rikki Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house at Sigoli, had carefully told Rikki what to do if ever he came across white men. Then Rikki Tikki went out into the garden to see what was to be seen. It was a large garden, only half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses of marshall